Hello, greetings, make yourselves comfortable, and let us follow the next mystery. The disappearance of 3,000 infantrymen, truth or myth? The disappearance of 3,000 infantrymen in 1937 represents one of the most mysterious and frequently discussed stories connected with the Second Sino-Japanese War. It continues to generate interest among enthusiasts of military history, as well as among fans of unexplained phenomena. According to the version passed down over the years, an entire unit of the Chinese army was sent on a combat mission and then completely disappeared without a trace, without the sound of battle, without remains, without a single survivor or witness. There are no reports of a battle, nor evidence of an ambush or mass killing, which makes the story even more sinister. The case is mentioned in numerous online forums, blogs, documentary articles, and publications dealing with historical mysteries and unexplained phenomena. It is often presented in a dramatic tone and sparks the imagination of readers, raising questions about possible conspiracies, paranormal intervention, or military experiments. What makes the story particularly intriguing is the absence of any specific information. There are no archived names, exact dates, geographic coordinates, or witness testimonies. The very absence of evidence creates an atmosphere of mystery that continues to maintain interest in this story. Although many people accept this account as a possible event, when it is examined through the prism of historical data, it turns out that there are no official records confirming such an incident. Neither Chinese nor Japanese military archives contain information about a unit of about 3,000 men that disappeared without a trace during that period. No respected historian has documented such a case in research on the Second Sino-Japanese War. Nevertheless, the story of the missing infantrymen continues to be passed down from generation to generation, especially through unofficial information channels, and serves as an example of how legends are born, grow, and withstand the test of time. Although unproven, the story remains part of the military mythology of the 20th century, an embodiment of the eternal human need to seek meaning, logic, or something supernatural in the face of the unexplained. The disappearance of the 3,000 infantrymen first began to be mentioned on English language websites dedicated to mysteries and paranormal phenomena in the early 2000s. According to the stories, during the fighting between Chinese forces and the Japanese army, a group of 3,000 infantrymen sent to a strategic position somehow evaporated. The story became widely popular because it is not only mysterious but also extremely frightening, even unacceptable to the logic of the ordinary person. According to the account, no one reported an attack, no bodies were found, and the unit simply disappeared without a trace. Such uncertainty in the events raises questions about invisible forces, supernatural phenomena, or even secret experiments that might lie behind this unexplained incident. In 1937, the Second Sino-Japanese War began, a bloody and prolonged conflict that was actually part of the broader framework of World War II. The war included brutal battles such as the Battle of Shanghai and the horrific Nanjing Massacre. Hundreds of thousands died, and millions were displaced. In this chaos, the disappearance of groups of soldiers is not entirely impossible, especially in mountainous or remote areas without communication. But no official Chinese or Japanese archive contains records of the mysterious disappearance of 3,000 people at once. In military history, there are dozens of cases in which combat units were completely destroyed. Their remains were not discovered, or soldiers were declared missing. For example, during World War I, there are legends about a missing battalion in Gallipoli, the British story of the Norfolk Battalion, which according to some was swallowed by a fog. The truth is more prosaic. Most likely the soldiers were destroyed by enemy fire and their bodies buried on the battlefield. The disappearance of 3,000 infantrymen is often presented as a unique and unexplained case. But within the framework of the Sino-Japanese War, there are other incidents in which entire units lost contact, disappeared in the chaos of combat operations, or were completely destroyed by Japanese forces without detailed documentation of their fate. Nevertheless, a specific case of the disappearance of exactly 3,000 infantrymen, without any trace, without survivors, and without a record in official military archives, is absent from both Chinese and Japanese historical sources, which makes the story more likely a myth than a real event. The disappearance of 3,000 infantrymen remains a topic that provokes imagination and historical curiosity. But what could actually lie behind this mystery? Despite the lack of evidence, several possible explanations offer a more realistic view of the origin of this legend. Fantasy based on real events. It is entirely possible that the story is rooted in a real military incident in which a combat unit suffered serious losses, but due to the chaos of war, it was not properly recorded or documented. Over time, and as the story was passed from mouth to mouth, what happened may have been exaggerated to the point that it turned into a sensational mystery. Propaganda. In conditions of military conflict, spreading fear and uncertainty can be a powerful weapon. It is possible that the story was deliberately used as a form of psychological warfare to emphasize the invincible strength of the enemy, or to suggest that forces beyond ordinary understanding were operating at the front. Such stories often serve to mobilize the population or justify military failures. A miscommunicated story over time, especially when translations between different languages and cultures are involved, a story may undergo serious changes. It is possible that the original account described a smaller combat group or even a completely different incident. Through speculation, rumors, and unofficial interpretations, the truth may have been replaced by a myth that continues to exist as a folkloric reflection of a turbulent era. Researchers and historians often emphasize how easily a fragment of history can be transformed into a sensation, especially when it lacks context and verification. In the case of the disappearance of the Chinese infantrymen, this transformation is particularly illustrative of the way collective memory and imagination intertwine in a network of myths in which the real and the imagined are difficult to distinguish. Stories like this are often taken up by paranormal shows about conspiracies or unexplained phenomena. The disappearance of 3 Zalosan infantrymen is an ideal cinematic plot. There is war, mystery, and a lack of evidence, which makes the story almost impossible to disprove. In fact, the fewer the facts, the stronger the public's interest grows. The story of the missing infantrymen reminds us of the power of storytelling and how easily people can accept something as truth when context is missing. Legends are often born from the need to explain the unexplained, to find meaning in the chaos of war, or simply to tell a good story. The disappearance of 3,000 infantrymen has not been confirmed by any official source and is most likely a product of rumors, exaggerations, or creative invention. However, this does not reduce interest in the story. It continues to live on as part of the military mysteries of the 20th century. The truth remains elusive, but the legend itself is an example of how stories outlive facts, especially when they contain mystery, death, and war. If we look more deeply into the historical context of the conflict, some sources offer a more detailed overview of the events and the tension between the two countries in that period, including analysis of the War of 1937